Suburban House, Oregon. It was early March, a cold night. I got home late from work. It was almost midnight. That day had been especially exhausting, and all I wanted was to crack open a cold beer and stretch out on the couch. That's exactly what I did. I didn't even turn on the TV at first. I just sat there, closed my eyes, and enjoyed the silence, trying not to think about how stressful my life was. A few minutes later, I decided to turn on the TV. As I flipped through channels, nothing caught my interest. I finally gave up and continued drinking my beer in silence. But peace and quiet wasn't meant for me, I guess, because exactly 10 seconds later, all the lights in the house went out at the same time. You know that slightly fuzzy popping sound? The one that comes a split second before everything shuts off? Yeah, I heard that sound. My first reaction was to open the door and check the neighbors' houses. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. It was late, but at least one neighbor's lights were on, so the problem was just my house. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. This headache was definitely going to ruin the rest of my night. I turned back to go inside, but the door wouldn't open. It was locked. I froze, trying to understand. I tried the handle a few more times. It was definitely locked. What was going on? I banged on the door and called my wife's name. Maybe she had woken up and I hadn't noticed. No answer. I tried to peer through the glass, but everything was dark. I couldn't see anything. I ran around to the back of the house. The back door was locked too. I started to panic. My wife usually left doors unlocked. The back door being locked was strange. I ran to the side of the house to check the breaker box, and I froze. My hose, which I knew had been coiled, was lying in the grass, right below the breaker box. The truth hit me like a freight train. Someone had cut the power intentionally. Without thinking, I sprinted to the nearest window, tried to look inside, and this time I saw 2 flashlights, swinging wildly in the darkness, like 2 people were rummaging through my house. They were thieves. I knew it. They were stealing my stuff. I was infuriated. The nerve to do this while I was literally home. I reached for my pocket to call the police, but my phone was on the couch inside. I told myself, run to the neighbors, borrow the phone. But then a more sinister thought hit me. My wife was still inside. She was probably sleeping, vulnerable to those thieves. I couldn't leave her there, not even for another minute. I sprinted back to the house, grabbed some loose rocks from the yard, started throwing them at our bedroom window. After the 3rd rock, she opened the window. Before she had a chance to say anything, I quietly told her what was happening, told her to hide in the closet. Her head disappeared immediately. She didn't ask questions. Then I sprinted to my neighbor's house, pounded on the door, explained as quickly as possible, used his phone to call the police. I waited on his porch, praying my wife would be okay. The police eventually arrived. They stormed into the house. But it was too late. The back door was wide open. The thieves were gone, and they had taken too many of our valuables. My wife was more shaken than I was, and understandably so. What she told me and the police made me angry at myself for not doing a better job protecting her. To this day, I'll never forgive myself for leaving her in the house with potential murderers. My wife said, mere seconds after I told her to hide, someone kicked the bedroom door open. The person walked into the room and cocked a gun. He stood there for a few seconds, motionless, clearly listening for anyone in the room. My wife said she had never been more terrified in her entire life. The intruders heard me throwing rocks at the window, I think. The scariest part is, we still live in this house and we're not planning to move out anytime soon. Sometimes I think about what could have happened if I hadn't stepped outside for those brief moments. Maybe nothing would have happened. Maybe the power really had gone out by accident. But I know that's not true, because 3 days later, the police called us again. We examined your electrical box, the officer said. Someone manually shut off the main breaker, and they used a tool to open the panel. So this was a professional job. They'd been watching your house. They knew your routine, they knew when you'd come home. But why did they cut the power? I was already inside. The officer paused. Because they wanted to get you outside, without your phone, without your gun, defenseless. I froze. "And it worked," the officer said. "While you were outside, they were inside. With your wife." I couldn't sleep that night, because I realized something else. Those thieves, why didn't they hurt my wife? They had guns. They had the opportunity, but they didn't. Like, they hadn't just come to take things. Like, they had come for something else. And when I went outside, their plan changed. I still don't know the truth. Neither do the police, but sometimes at night I wake up and look out the window and I think, are they still watching? Will they come back? And next time, will they not cut the power? Suburban House, Washington. I've always lived in my older brother's shadow. I'm not bitter about it, but it's just the truth. He's got a successful business. I've been trying to replicate that for the better part of 6 years now. I recently moved back in with my parents to try and find some footing. Going back home definitely felt like a step backward, but I didn't have many options. I was staying in the basement to keep out of their way as much as I could. The basement wasn't too bad, actually. It was almost like a mini apartment. It had its own kitchen, bathroom, office, bedroom, even a TV with my old video games. With all that, I rarely went upstairs. I could pretty much live down there on my own. One night, it was either Friday or Saturday, there was a pretty nasty storm outside. Rain was hammering against the windows, and the wind was strong enough to rattle the whole house. I'm not exaggerating. It was one of the wildest storms I had ever seen at that point. My parents were out of town for the weekend, so I had the place to myself, which was fine by me. The basement felt extra cozy that night. I love listening to a raging storm from the comfort of a warm bed, especially late at night. There's something about hunkering down inside during a chaotic storm that really eases my mind. I was about to fall asleep to the soothing patter of rain when the power suddenly went out. Everything clicked off at once. I was left in total darkness. I groaned, annoyed at the inconvenience. I figured the storm must have knocked out the power. For a second, I thought about going to check the breaker, but I didn't feel like dealing with it. Not with the storm raging outside. Besides, I was about to go to bed anyway. I didn't really know where the breaker was to begin with. I figured I'd just wait it out and deal with it in the morning. As I lay there trying to get comfortable again, I heard something. A loud, unnatural thud against one of the basement windows. It sounded heavy, like something had hit it hard. My first thought was that maybe a branch had come loose in the wind or a tree had fallen, but the sound was sharp and deliberate. As lazy as I wanted to be, I couldn't ignore a fallen tree. That was a bit of a step up from a simple power outage. Reluctantly, I got out of bed and grabbed my phone, used the flashlight to make my way over to the window. The basement was pitch black. The only sounds were the rain pelting the glass and the low rumble of thunder outside. I remember rubbing the sleep out of my eyes, trying to wake myself up a little bit. I held my phone up to the window, squinting through the glass. And my heart stopped. There was a man's face pressed up against the window, staring in at me. His eyes were wide, his skin pale and drenched, and for a split second, he made direct eye contact with me. As soon as he saw me looking, he moved away from the window. I stumbled back, almost dropping my phone. What the hell had I just seen? I could barely breathe. But I didn't have much time to process it, because a few seconds later, I started hearing another sound. Footsteps. I listened closely. The floorboards above my head were creaking gently. There were people in the house. Between what I had just seen and what I was hearing, I was on the verge of losing it. I was home alone, and my house was literally getting broken into. On top of everything, one of them knew I was in the basement. I couldn't think clearly with how severe the situation was. Everything was happening so fast. But I had no choice but to act. I quickly checked my phone, ready to call the police. But then I remembered. The power outage had knocked out the Wi-Fi. With no cell service in the basement, I was trapped down there, totally cut off. I knew I couldn't just sit around and wait for these people to do whatever they'd come to do. I tried to calm myself, thinking through my options. I couldn't let those strangers just roam around my house. but I definitely didn't want to confront them head-on. I was literally stuck in a lose-lose situation. I decided I'd try to sneak upstairs, slip out the front door quietly, and then call the police once I was outside. I didn't have another choice. Keeping my footsteps as quiet as possible, I made my way to the basement stairs. I still remember the pure fear of that moment. You never know how your body is going to react to something traumatic until it happens. When I reached the top, I peered around the stairwell. My heart sank, because I saw 3 figures with flashlights moving around my pitch-black house. I watched them for a few seconds, literally petrified. One of their flashlights panned across their body just long enough for me to make out what one of them was carrying: a gun. I froze. Every muscle in my body was tense. I didn't move. I just watched as they murmured to each other in low voices. That's when I heard one of them say something. Something that escalated the situation even further, if that was even possible. In a calm, almost casual voice, one of them said, "Alex is in the basement, go find him." I can't describe the terror I was feeling. How the fuck did he know my name? I backed down the stairs as quietly as I could, trying to keep my breathing steady. But inside, I was losing my shit entirely. I knew I didn't have much time. They were coming for me, and I had no idea what was going to happen once they found me. I looked around frantically, considering potential hiding spots. There wasn't time. I needed to get the hell out of there in the next minute, or I was going to die. The only possible way out was through one of the basement windows, but they were all sealed from the inside. I had no other choice. I grabbed a nearby stool, climbed up one of the window wells and smashed the glass with my elbow. Shards of glass flew everywhere, but I didn't care. I scrambled through the broken window, pulling myself out into the rain. I felt the cuts all over my body, but I didn't have time to register the pain. With the adrenaline and fear coursing through my veins, the downpour soaked me instantly. I ran through the mud, trying not to slip. Once I was a safe distance from the house, I finally got a signal and called the police. I remember my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. By the time the police searched the house, whoever had been in there was long gone. So much stuff had been stolen. My parents were livid. They threatened to kick me out of the house. I basically had to beg them not to, insisting there was nothing else I could have done. They eventually calmed down, but I'm still pretty shaken by the whole ordeal. I still have no idea who those people were or how they knew my name. I hate thinking about what might have happened had they found me. 3 months later, I received an email. Subject: "Hello, Alex." Inside was just one photo, a photo of me, in the basement. That night, it had been taken from the window, and below the photo, "We missed you, but don't worry. Next time we'll catch you." Industrial Warehouse, New Jersey. I live in a quiet suburban area, but there are a lot of more densely populated towns within driving distance. A few months ago, I picked up a night shift security job at a warehouse a few towns over. The building was situated in this industrial space that stretched on for miles. The building itself was isolated, rows and rows of tall metal shelves and a couple of big loading docks. The work was easy, routine checks, basic security, making sure everything stayed locked up. It was quiet, usually too quiet, but I didn't mind. I liked the solitude. Most nights I could finish my shift without much happening. It was a Thursday night. It was pouring outside. I was checking my phone every so often for updates on the storm. I wasn't too keen on having to drive home in those conditions. Luckily, there wasn't much for me to do that night. At least I had that going for me. The power in the warehouse flickered a few times, but held steady. I wasn't too worried. But about an hour in, the power finally gave out, plunging the whole warehouse into pitch-black darkness. I was pissed. I was the only employee there that night, so the responsibility for restoring the power was mine. I had obviously been prepped for a situation like this, but I never thought I'd actually have to deal with it. I stepped out of my little security room to begin the process. They had instructed me to unplug some of the massive machines before checking the breakers, so that's what I went to do. My flashlight was the only source of light in the whole place. It was honestly creepy as hell. The silence felt thicker in the dark. Every creak of the building seemed louder without the hum of the lights. My footsteps echoed like 100 times louder too, which was definitely an odd feeling. As I was patrolling one of the aisles, I heard a loud metallic clattering echoing from somewhere deeper in the warehouse. It startled me, but I brushed it off as the storm rattling the roof or the metal shutters. Still, I decided to check it out, aisle by aisle. When I rounded one corner, I froze. A faint beam of light was moving along the shelves up ahead. It looked just like my own flashlight. It clicked off as quickly as I had seen it. But I had definitely seen it. No one should have been there until morning, though. I felt my heart start to race. Why the hell would someone else be in here? I debated calling out, but ultimately decided against it. When I reached the spot where I had seen the light, it was gone. The aisle was empty, just rows of crates and shelves stacked high with inventory. I started freaking out. I knew I wasn't going crazy. I knew what I saw. I had a job to do, though. I debated calling the police, but wasn't sure if what I had seen would be enough. In hindsight, had the company not equipped me with a taser, I probably would have just called the police right there. As I continued my patrol, a strange smell hit me. A musty, metallic odor, like rusted metal or stagnant water. The smell was coming from one of the loading bays, a darker part of the warehouse where crates were stacked floor to ceiling. I followed the smell with my flashlight, and that's when I noticed something odd. My beam reflected off the polished concrete floor, revealing 2 sets of wet footprints leading into one of the storage aisles. In that moment, I wanted to run in the opposite direction and call the police, but I couldn't just yet. If anyone was poking around, it was on me. That was literally my job. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow the trail. I kept my flashlight low, not wanting to make it obvious where I was. As I got closer, I started hearing faint whispers, just barely audible, like 2 people having a conversation a few miles away. I couldn't make out the words, but something about the tone sounded tense, almost urgent. I clicked off my flashlight and held my breath, trying not to make any noise. I gripped my taser and crept closer to the whispering. As I turned the corner, I raised my flashlight to confront whoever was there. But there was honest to God no one in front of me. The whispering had also stopped. This was pure insanity. They had literally been right in front of me. How the hell had they disappeared so quickly? The whole situation had me rattled. I decided I wasn't getting paid enough for this. I decided to just make a beeline for the circuit room and get the power on without worrying about my other tasks. I made it there and started fumbling around with the breakers in the dark. As I was doing that, I heard something scrape across the floor nearby. I swung my flashlight around and spotted the edge of a metal tool lying just a few feet away. A crowbar. It hadn't been there before. This was serious now. Whoever was in there with me had potentially malicious intentions. I yelled out that I was armed, which was kind of a half-bluff considering the taser. I needed to get out of there as fast as possible. My nerves were shot at that point, but I knew my life was more valuable than whatever consequences I'd face for leaving. As I was heading for the door, a loud metallic crash echoed from the far end of the building, followed by the unmistakable sound of rushing footsteps. I felt a surge of adrenaline and started running toward the noise. I turned the corner and there they were. Standing in the middle of the aisle were 2 figures dressed all in black. One of them was holding a crowbar identical to the one I had just walked past. They looked at me for a split second. Then, without warning, started sprinting directly towards me. I didn't think, I just turned and ran. All the confidence I had just mustered up was gone. I could hear their footsteps pounding behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I weaved through the aisles, praying that I'd be able to navigate this place better than they could. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps faded. I paused, catching my breath, and realized they weren't chasing me anymore. Eventually, I made my way toward the exit door and stepped outside. I immediately called the police and begged them to come as quickly as possible. They actually arrived pretty quickly, which I was thankful for. Of course, those 2 strangers were long gone by then, but the officers were really helpful, even helped me get my power back up. My boss was not as sympathetic, though. He gave me shit for running. I almost lost my job over the whole incident. I still can't get over how strange the whole encounter was. like it was clear that those people were messing with me, but they still chased me with a weapon. The worst part is I still work nights in that warehouse. Although my boss did start putting at least 2 people on the shift every night, I still don't know what to make of the whole thing. I'm just glad those guys didn't catch up to me. But sometimes I think, what did they want? Were they just thieves or something else? And why did they play with me like they enjoyed scaring me? Like this was a game for them. And I was the prey. I still work the night shift. I still walk those aisles. But now I always look behind me, because I know, maybe one day, they'll come back. And next time, I might not escape. 2 weeks later, I found something in my office, on my desk, something that shouldn't have been there. A crowbar, the same crowbar, from that night, and taped to it with duct tape a note, "Good game, let's play again."